Hello, I'm John, and this is my channel, Must Read More. Today I have a book haul. Um, it's actually over the whole about a week and a half or 2 weeks, somewhere in there. It's not all books that they're not books that I got all at once, and I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time talking about most of them because most of them are new to me, and I don't know much about them. I know a little bit about some of them, some of the subjects, but um, they're mostly new to me, so hopefully this video won't be super long, but there are quite a few books. I don't know if I'll show them all, but I'll try to. So the first ones I got were two of the Carla trilogy, John le Carre's Carla trilogy, George Smiley facing off against Carla, the Soviet super spy. These are only two of them. I've read the Carla trilogy before, about 10 or 11 years ago. Longer than that, probably. It was probably when I was 18 or 19, and I'm certain that it went over my head. I know it went over my head because as I was reading it, I was going, what? So there was a lot that I missed, and recently I watched the Alec Guinness version of Tinker Tailor from, I think, from '79, and it just reminded me of how much went over my head. So I thought that the next time I saw the set, I would just go ahead and buy it. This is only two. There are three. There's one, let's see, this one is the first one, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and this is the third one, I believe, Smiley's People. And there's one in between called The Honourable Schoolboy, which is about Jerry Westerby and something going on in Hong Kong. I remember there's a scene where he has to go into a building and take pictures of files, and something about an airport and Cambodia. So I really don't remember the series too well. So one of these days, hopefully, I'll reread it. The next one is a book I've been looking for quite some time, and you can't see it, but it's right up there. I bought an edition of it, but I didn't realize until I got it home that it was the Reader's Digest condensed version. And I'm not against condensed books, I guess, if you're in a, if you have a short period of time to read or whatever, but I wanted the full set, the full edition, so I got Daphne du Maurier's Jamaica Inn. This is not the edition I really wanted, but this is the first edition that I've seen. I've been looking for this book for probably 8 or 9 months, and this is the first edition that I've seen. So, well, what happened was I brought that other one home, the condensed version, and I read a few pages, and I thought, this is interesting, and I put it down and went to do something else, and when I came back, I realized it was a condensed volume. So, I put it down, and I've been waiting to find this one. I have several of du Maurier's books, but I haven't read them yet. I've read her story, Don't Look Now, which was the basis for that Donald Sutherland movie, which is pretty creepy, actually. So, yeah, Jamaica Inn. The next one is Blood on the Risers by John Leppelman? I'm not sure. An airborne soldier's 35 months in Vietnam. So, in 3 straight years, he was a paratrooper, an Army seaman, and a LARP, and he lived to tell about it. So, paratrooper, I guess he was a river rat, and a LARP. So, LARPs, basically, they took them out on helicopters and dumped them in the middle of nowhere and said, go wander around and see what's going on. So, that should be pretty good. Some of these books are kind of dry. Some of them aren't very good. The people who make the best soldiers sometimes don't make the best writers. But I have quite a few books like this that I need to get to. In fact, one of the things about doing these book hauls is that it really makes me sit here and think about all these books that I already have that I really need to read. Like, these books behind me, I've never read any of these. I keep all the books that I've read and kept downstairs in my bedroom. These are basically my TBR shelves. These are fiction. All this is fiction. So a nice thing about these book hauls is that it really forces me to look at all these books I'm getting, and all these books that I have, and to consider that maybe I need to slow down on the buying and start reading more. So, yeah. The next one is Day One, Before Hiroshima and After by Peter Wyden, author of Bay of Pigs. Never read Bay of Pigs. I've seen a book called Bay of Pigs, but it wasn't by Peter Wyden. And I think it's pretty clear what this is about. Hiroshima changed the world. It's never been the same afterwards, and it'll never be the same again. And it's easy to think that it was a long time ago, but the atomic bomb on Hiroshima was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6th, 1945, Japanese time, which means that it was dropped in American time. It was on August 5th. My grandpa was born on August 5th, 1945, and I talked to him 3 days ago. So it really wasn't all that long ago in the great scheme of things. And yeah, so I read another book about this once before, and I've read several books about nuclear war and novels and nonfiction. It's kind of I have a dark fascination with nuclear weapons that I don't really understand, and it's hard to really put it into words because they are awful. I mean, they're truly awful. It's something I don't even quite understand. It's something that we have to deal with in the modern world, and I think that after the fall of the Soviet Union, it's something we don't spend a lot of time thinking about, but they're still out there. They're still waiting for another Hiroshima or an accident. So, yeah, that's Day One. After that is Alone by Michael Korda. This is about the period right before and right after the fall of France in 1940. Right? Yes, 1940. I've read several books about that period lately in the last year. There was one called The Duel. I don't remember who wrote that. And the other one was called The Phony War. It's a really interesting period of time where after the fall of France, Great Britain was really left on its own to face, the barbarians at the gates. They were right across the channel, and the channel's not very wide. So it's just kind of that whole story is really interesting, the Dunkirk and everything. So I've never read anything by Michael Korda, so I don't know anything about this one. I just saw it and picked it up. And we have The Last King of America by Andrew Roberts, the misunderstood reign of George III, which I'm just kind of laughing because when I was a kid I had a friend named Andrew Roberts. Not this Andrew Roberts, but anyway. So it's kind of interesting, I think, in the U.S. that even if we know quite a lot about the American Revolution, we tend not to know very much about George III. He's a pretty interesting guy. I mean, there was a lot going on in that period of time. So this is a great big book too. It's really, really long. It's like 700 pages long. So all these books I got were all about $1. So I'm lucky enough to live where the books are still pretty cheap. Used books, anyway. I don't know how people afford new books, to be honest, because I buy 30 books for the price of one, usually. So I don't know when I'll get to this, but I have a lot of books about the British monarchs. It's right over here. It's a big, long shelf full, and they're stacked in front of them too. So I really need to get to these books about the monarchs, and there's several books about just England and Great Britain. So I you know, like I said, the nice thing about these book hauls is I'm looking at these books and thinking, I need to read these books. I need to stop buying books and start reading them. Next, after that, I bought these are, if you saw my video on why I DNF'd Gibbons' Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, it was because the footnotes in this are in the back. They're endnotes. And I just saw these for a couple of dollars a piece, and I thought, well, there's no reason that I can't. This is the same edition, so I thought I can read one book and keep the other one open to the footnotes in the back, and that way I won't have to flip back and forth. And this is William Least Heat Moon's Roads to Quoz, an American Mosey, which I've read his book. Was it Blue Highways? And I liked that. This is later on. I think this is from 2006 or somewhere in there, 2008 maybe, somewhere in that period. Let's see. 2008. So hopefully this will be good. I tend to like older travelogues, and especially when people are just driving around the U.S., I seem to like those better. But this may be just as good. I don't know. So, like I said, all these books were cheap, so they're just books I'm taking a chance on. After that is the Downing Street years. In one of my previous videos, I held up a Margaret Thatcher biography, and that's the one that stuck as the thumbnail. And I'm pretty interested in Margaret Thatcher because she was around for, you know, as Prime Minister for something like 12 years, quite a long period of time. And I don't know much about her. It's interesting to me that I can never pin down who liked Margaret Thatcher and who disliked her, because it seems sometimes that the people who should have disliked her liked her, and the people who liked her should have disliked her. So, did I say that right? I'm not sure. So, yeah, but this is a big book also, and you have to be careful with these, you know, Margaret Thatcher wrote this, or anytime a politician writes their own book, you have to be a little bit wary of the contents, because they're going to sculpt it to suit themselves, to make themselves look better. They're going to leave things out, and I have no doubts that Margaret Thatcher left things out and sculpted things to her own uses. So, I don't know, I saw this somewhere. Somebody read this at some point. I can't remember who. I wish I could. It's probably Steve Donahue, come to think of it. But, yeah, so I don't have a clue when I'll get to that, because I'd probably need to read the biography of Margaret Thatcher before I dive into this thing, I think. So, yeah. The next one is Great Detectives, A Century of the Best Mysteries from England and America, edited by David Willis McCullough. So, there's 2 novels, Ross MacDonald's The Chill and Ruth Rendell's Death Notes, several novellas, and stories by Dorothy Sayers, G.K. Chesterton, Agatha Christie, William Faulkner, Raymond Chandler, Ellery Queen, P.D. James, Ed McBain. So I like that cover too. I just I don't do so well with short stories, short mysteries, but I thought this was an interesting looking book, and it's probably pretty good. So, you know, just taking a chance. This is in Retrospect by Robert S. McNamara. McNamara was the Secretary of Defense for Kennedy and Johnson during the Vietnam War. And in the mid-90s, he decided to write this book, or to publish this book, which basically is him saying, yeah, I knew we shouldn't be doing this, but I kept my mouth shut. So like the Margaret Thatcher book, I'm not sure how much of this will be genuine and honest and how much of it will be self-serving. I haven't heard a lot about this one. I've seen it quite often, but I just picked it up, just decided to get it this time. And then at my local half-price books, well, I have two. One's a little bit further away than the other one, but they're both in the same town or in the same city. And they were having a bit of a shelf clearing event, and this is what was left over, so I got there late. They were having a sale, and I made it a couple days afterwards. And they had cleared a bunch of science fiction and fantasy, so they were $1 or so a piece. And I don't read a lot of science fiction. I find it kind of hard to get into that mindset. Oddly, I don't find it hard to read horror. I think because horror usually starts from a regular, from our world as it is, and something strange happens in that regular world, whereas a lot of times in science fiction, and particularly in fantasy, of course, we start from a different world where things are really different from our own, and it gets weirder, you know. So I just kind of have trouble getting into that sometimes. Not always. I like a good science fiction. I'm not as big a fan of fantasy, but I do read a little bit here and there. So these were all really cheap. They were all on clearance. So here's Lost World of Time by Lynn Carter. I'm not going to talk too much about these because I don't really know much about them. I've never read a book by Lynn Carter, but I've heard about them. So they're kind of, are they kind of like Conan pastiches? I'm not really sure. Yeah, probably. So then there's A.E. Van Vogt's, is it Van Vogt or Van Vogt? I'm not really sure. I have several of his books, but I haven't read any of them. I started one for Rocket Summer, and I just kind of, I just couldn't get into it. This is short stories, I think. Destination Universe. This is one that I'm currently reading. It's pretty good so far. It's called The Tartarus Incident, and I'll talk more about this in a wrap-up sometime. Tartarus Incident by William Greenleaf. It's pretty good so far. And here's Tomorrow is Too Far by James White. And I was just kind of intrigued by this cover. I like these. When I read science fiction, I prefer to read it from about the mid-50s up until about 1980, or even in the early 80s. There was so much social change and you know, new technology that science fiction really shined in that period. And most of the books are pretty short, so it doesn't require a great deal of effort, but some of them can be very thought-provoking, and I do like that. So that's just he looks like he's having a bad time. So now this next one is C.J. Cherryh, Voyager in Night. And the first time I ever heard about this book was in, I think, one of Bookpild's videos from about 2 years ago, back when he still had the sci-fireplace behind him, before he started traveling the world. And he found this pretty interesting, and this is the first copy I've seen, so I got it. I don't really know a whole lot about it. I don't remember what he thought about it or anything. So, yeah. The next one is in plastic. It's Dying Inside by Robert Silverberg. And I've heard about this one quite a bit also from, I think Bookfeld read it, and then also the Outlaw Booksellers talked about it a couple of times. He really likes Silverberg, and so do I. I do really like Silverberg. He's very impressive. Silverberg has thoughts all over the place, and he wrote about all kinds of things, and his books are very interesting. So I don't remember exactly what this one is about, though, or I'd talk more about it. But it's kind of a, I guess, and this is from either the late 60s or the early 70s. Looks more 60s than 70s to me, but I could be wrong. Then this one is Harlan Ellison's No Doors, No Windows, and this is also short stories. I don't always like Ellison. I think a lot of people feel that way about Ellison in person when he was alive, but also his stories. I think he was a very impressive writer, though. It's just his work doesn't always click with me. So there's that. I've got two more. So the next one is The Milagro Beanfield War by John Nichols. I just really liked this cover, and this book is solid like a brick. And I don't really know anything about this. I'm kind of wondering if anybody knows, is this a comedy? Is it kind of sort of a comedy? I don't really know. It looked pretty interesting. It's about a guy who illegally taps into a water main so he can grow beans, and this causes a lot of trouble in his town. So I don't really know what it's about. I don't know, I was just kind of drawn to this one, so I've read a little, here and there, and it looks pretty interesting, so. The next one I did pay, this is the last one. I paid about $8 for this one, and the reason is that I never see it for less than $8. Or $9 or more. I've been hoping to find it at a Goodwill or someplace for $1, and it just hasn't happened. And this one of his stories is one of my favorite stories. It's kind of a science fiction horror story, which is the Vaults of Ymus. I hope I said that right. I sometimes call it the Gates of Ymus, but it is the Vaults of Ymus. Yes, it's the Vaults of Ymus. And that is Clark Ashton Smith's The Dark Eidolon and Other Fantasies. So I never see this one for very cheap. I never see anything by Clark Ashton Smith, except sometimes in anthologies. And I've just really been wanting to read more of his work. I know he didn't really write a whole lot. He quit writing early, but he was a contemporary of Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard. And like I said, I was just really impressed by the Vaults of Ymus, and I've been wanting to read more of his work. So that's all the books that I have to share with you today. If you know anything about any of these books, I'd be glad to hear about it. So let me know. And thank you, and I'll see you next time.